Hi, everybody. Jennifer Schaus here, and we're coming to you live today from Washington, D.C. And thanks for joining us in our webinar series. This year in 2024, we are covering the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, which is the rule book, more or less, on how the government procures goods and services. We're going sequentially through each part of the FAR, and there are 52 parts. We're covering these on Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 Eastern. They are all complimentary and recorded. You can find the recordings on our YouTube channel, along with 650 other government contracting webinars. The PowerPoints are posted over on slideshare.net, and you can log into slideshare.net with your LinkedIn credentials, and it won't cost you anything. If you do want to advertise or sponsor any of our webinars, you can shoot us an email to the hello@jenniferschaus.com, and we will send over the media kit with pricing. If you want to register for the FAR, as we mentioned, if you go over to our website, navigate to the section called the FAR. The recordings will also be listed here, but also keep in mind if you're anxious to get a jump start, you can navigate over to the section called webinars. Scroll down to the FAR 2020. That was the last time we covered this series. The information will obviously be a little bit out of date, as that was 4 years ago. So things have changed, but just keep that in mind. A little bit about us. We do provide professional services consulting for established government contractors, primarily helping them with GSA schedules, but other services are provided for proposal writing, contract administration, pricing, market analysis, and more. You can find more about us on our website. In the event that you're selling to federal government contractors, we put on about 3 to 4 events per year at the Kennedy Center with 300 to 400 federal government contractors. We've got sponsorship opportunities there. We've also got a newsletter that goes out every Monday that reaches 29,000 plus federal government contractors. You can advertise in that. And you can advertise in our webinar series and more. Again, if you want information about pricing for advertising, send us an email to the hello@jenniferschaus.com. Some classes that we've got coming up here with our friends over at the Michigan Apex Accelerator, formerly known as the PTAC. We're going to be talking about GSA schedules. That's a complimentary webinar, and I believe that is through Microsoft Teams. In fact, it is, as you can see by the link below. Instead of memorizing this URL, if you hop over to our website and click on the section called Events, even though this is a webinar, if you scroll over to Events, you can find this and other classes that we're teaching there, as well as recordings. If anybody needs help with DHS PACS or NASA SOUP, we do provide those services as well. And so you can find those, or actually just shoot us an email to the hello@jenniferschaus.com. Some sponsored content webinars that are on the radar. We've got a busy March coming up with a lot of Tuesdays and Thursdays. So the Federal Forecasting app, which many of you may have already downloaded onto your phones, they are putting on a webinar with us called Building Relationships in Federal Contracting. That same week on Thursday, Agile ATS, their recruiting platform. They'll be demoing part of their platform and talking about recruiting strategies and systems for government contractors. MyGovWatch, another platform for finding various solicitations, has conducted a survey. And it's pretty interesting what their results are showing. So they're going to share those results with us on March 26th. Again, these are all complimentary. You can find them on our website under events, even though these are webinars. Back-to-back Thursdays in June with Carrie Palmatier. It's going to be talking about SBIRs and STTRs. Those are both complimentary, also on our website under events. Okay. So we want to thank our friends and sponsors who help make this series possible without any charges to you, the attendees. So first, we want to thank our friends at GovEvents. That's the premier platform for posting events related to government and government contracting. You can find all of our webinars and our events on govevents.com, as well as recordings from our past 650 plus webinars. We also want to thank Tom Johnson and his team at Set Aside Alert. That's the go-to publication for contracting opportunities for small women-owned, veteran-owned, hub zone, and 8A firms. Visit setasidealert.com for more information. The Fairfax Economic Development Authority has an online calendar of events and webinars. and we want to thank them for posting our events and webinars on their calendar. The Virginia the Virginia Apex Accelerator at George Mason University offers free one-on-one counseling to established government contracting firms in Virginia on federal, state, and local procurement topics. If you're interested in learning more, please use the links provided to explore their services, review homework recommendations, register for live training, and find useful links to agencies and other self-directed learning. One-on-one counseling is limited to eligible client companies. Appointment requests are handled in the order they were received and based on counselor availability due to high demand. Online resources and group trainings are free with no restriction on business location. Join the Greater Reston Chamber of Commerce, their monthly government contracting council meeting to network with contracting peers, learn about upcoming events, opportunities, and also contribute to future programming. The meetings take place the fourth Tuesday of each month at 8:30 a.m. at the Greater Reston Chamber of Commerce. The next meeting will be on Tuesday, March 26th. The one for February was yesterday, so February has been complete. So look ahead to Tuesday, March 26th. If you've got questions, you can contact Alicia Field. Her contact information is there on the screen. Okay, BidSpeed. Do you want help winning government contracts? BidSpeed can help. Users can find bidding opportunities from federal, state, and local government. Additionally, you can search for teaming partners, incumbent point of contact, expiring contracts, compliance matrix, and also proposal templates. Create your login today at bidspeed.com. BidSpeed is an official partner of the US SBA 7J Management and Technical Assistance Program. I believe this program actually just has either went through or is currently going through a name change. I forget what the new acronym is, and there's something with an E in it, but we will update that for Friday's webinar. The Federal Business Council events are the ultimate engagement channel to bring government and industry together. 68% of government personnel report that they attend more than one event each year. FBC has worked with government and industry for 45 plus years to create gatherings where ideas are shared and to help government achieve its goals. This includes agency industry days, cybersecurity symposiums, tech expos, and offsite meetings. FBC provides full life cycle meeting planning and event management. With over 5,000 meetings under their belt, FBC has the experience, systems, and personnel to make your next event exceptional. Learn more at fbcinc.com. Last but not least, our friends over at GovBrew. GovBrew is the most read government contracting newsletter, keeping thousands of GovCon professionals in the loop with news, updates, and opportunities in the federal contracting market. All in a fun and accessible email that only takes 5 minutes to read. It's 100% free to join. It goes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m. It's filled with great content, event postings, webinars, and more. We encourage you to sign up at govbrew.co, or you can use the QR code that you see on the screen. Okay, that is it for our sponsors. The reason that we are here today is to hear from Alexandra Prime on the FAR Part 10, and she's put together some great slides for you. I took a quick peek at them, and it looks like some great content. So I'm going to stop talking. I'll put myself on mute. Alexandra, it's great to have you with us. Just let me know when you're ready for your next slide, and the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here today talking to you about FAR Part 10, Market Research. Again, my name is Alexandra Prime. I am at the firm Miller & Chevalier Chartered, and my email is on the screen. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at the end of this presentation. And next slide, please. So, market research. FAR Part 10 prescribes policies and procedures for conducting market research to arrive at the most suitable approach to acquiring, distributing, and supporting supplies and services. But what is market research? So it's a continuous process for gathering information, not only about product characteristics, but also about the suppliers that provide them and the business practices used in the commercial sector. The second part of market research is then for an agency to analyze the data gathered in order to make the best acquisition decision. Next slide, please. So what are some of these business practices that the government considers when conducting market research? These include terms and conditions, discounts, volume pricing, buyer financing, essentially anything about the commercial environment in which these products and services are sold in the private sector. Now, there are two kinds of market research. The first is the market investigation, which is a specific one-time research pertaining to a particular requirement of the solicitation. The second kind of market research is market surveillance and intelligence. Now, this is an ongoing market research requirement throughout the life of the procurement. So you have the market investigation that is at the beginning of a solicitation, but you also have this market surveillance and intelligence, which is an ongoing requirement. For example, if you're looking to make a purchase of a car or a house, you wouldn't go out and look at specific properties today necessarily, but you might keep an eye on the market for the next several years, look at prices, trends, or features that you're interested in. You might talk to people who've recently purchased a similar property in the same neighborhood, so that when it's time for you to actually go and buy the house, you have a much more specific and fulsome idea of what the market looks like for you and what property you might want to buy. Next slide, please. Now, I want to briefly back up a little bit and talk about why federal agencies have to conduct market research. If you followed the series, you will recall that FAR Part 7 covers acquisition planning, and several of these FAR provisions are relevant for market research as well. There are three sections in FAR Part 7 that specifically refer to market research. The first, FAR 7.102, requires market research for all acquisitions for the purpose of promoting the acquisition of commercial products and commercial services, as well as full and open competition. FAR 7.105 requires acquisition plans to address the results and impact of market research. And finally, FAR 7.107 requires market research specifically when justifying bundling. Now, bundling is a particular type of consolidation. Consolidation of contracts is when an agency pulls several smaller individual contracts into one bigger one. And bundling specifically refers to the consolidation of two or more procurement requirements previously provided or performed under separate smaller contracts into a solicitation for a single contract that's likely to be unsuitable for award to a small business. Essentially, bundling makes these contracts unavailable to small businesses, or at the very least, much more difficult for small businesses to compete for. So bundling requires specific caution because the agency is taking away opportunities from small businesses. Next slide, please. So when must market research be conducted? Market research needs to be done before developing new requirements, a new requirements document, sorry. So this is before the contracting officer decides to go out and design an acquisition plan for something. Market research also needs to be done before soliciting offers for acquisitions over the simplified acquisition threshold, or SAT, which is currently $250,000. You also will need market research, must be performed in acquisitions under $250,000 if the cost is justified. So this means you're not going to go out and do market research when you're buying a couple $100s worth of office supplies, because it's not worth the cost. But there may be instances where market research is justified under that threshold. So when adequate information is not available about what the agency is trying to buy, or the agency isn't exactly sure what it's going to need to meet a particular requirement within a solicitation, market research may be justified and required in that situation, even under that $250,000 threshold. And then finally, as required by FAR 7.107, market research must be conducted before solicitations that could lead to bundling, which we just discussed, because this could lead to taking contracting opportunities away from small businesses, which the FAR requires additional sort of safety nets there. Now remember, there's also this continuing market research requirement that needs to be conducted throughout the life cycle of the acquisition. And next slide, please. So why do agencies use market research? According to FAR Part 10, it's the policy of the federal government to ensure that legitimate needs are identified and trade-offs are evaluated in order for the government to acquire new items to meet those needs. As we've already talked about briefly, agencies must conduct market research appropriate to the circumstances before soliciting a new acquisition or developing a new requirement within an existing acquisition. It's also the policy of the federal government to use market research to determine if sources exist that are capable of satisfying the agency's requirements and the extent to which commercial products and commercial services are suitable to the agency's needs. Or if commercial products or services aren't available, whether non-developmental items are available to meet those needs. The government also looks at market research to determine if commercial products or non-developmental items could be incorporated, if not for the entire requirement at a component level, all the way down each level of subcontracts. Market research also tells the agency whether it can or should utilize small business programs, which will be discussed at a later part of the series in detail in FAR Part 19. Finally, it's the government's policy to ensure maximum practicable use of recovered materials to promote energy conservation and efficiency, which market research can be used to determine as well. As we all know, sustainability is a new hot button topic in government contracting, and market research is very important for determining sustainability needs as well. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the goals of market research. First is to expand the use of commercial products and commercial services solutions that are already in the market, so that the government does not need to create or solicit a contractor to create something new. This is often much more time intensive, more expensive, and unnecessary if solutions already exist in the market that meet the government's needs. Another reason is to understand and incorporate commercial practices when possible. There may be some products or services used in other sectors that are better, newer, more innovative than what the government has. So the goal is to incorporate these new products into what the government uses as well. This ties into the next goal, which is identifying emerging technologies. What's new? What's out there that the government isn't already using? Part of market research involves reaching out to contractors of these emerging technologies and understanding what is out there. Tied closely to identifying emerging technologies is actually identifying any solutions the agency or government is currently using that are obsolete or need to be replaced by new technology. For example, is the current product ancient, or are components of the current product the government is using no longer being manufactured? Will it be impossible or extremely costly to replace or repair these parts? Looking at market research can tell an agency whether there's a newer technology to replace that ancient or no longer manufactured current product that's being used. An example of this is, if a replacement component is far more expensive because it's no longer manufactured, thinking about ink for printers or a certain specific type of paper that needs to be used. The market research can allow an agency to determine, would it be more cost effective for the agency to utilize a new solution, a new printer that keeps costs down because it's much cheaper and more effective to purchase the ink and the paper for that printer. Another goal of market research is expanding the use of non-developmental items. So things that are commercially available that could be easily adapted or modified to government use. These are items that are available in the marketplace, but just not quite right for the government, but it's almost the same. This requires a little bit of modification by the government, but it's a much more favorable outcome to customize these items that already exist than to create something new entirely, or contract with the industry to create something new entirely. This is not quite as favorable as using commercial products or services that already exist in the market, but it's almost as good. Finally, market research assists the contracting officer in the development of the acquisition strategy. This is the FAR Part 7. The acquisition strategy can include identifying small business set-aside opportunities. This includes women-owned, veteran-owned, HUB-zone, socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses. It also includes promoting best value acquisitions, having a good understanding of the commercial market and what exists out there, seeking to tailor contract terms and conditions specifically to the government's needs. The agency is using market research to look at the availability in the market, the delivery terms, and get the best value for the government. Next slide, please. Now, for the procedures by which the government conducts market research. First, the contracting officer needs to describe the solution needed by the agency in enough detail that market research is even possible. So the CO must figure out what is needed as specifically as possible so that the market research can be conducted with that specificity. The second step is using market research to determine if there are commercial products or commercial services or non-developmental items that are available to meet the agency's need. Specifically, if there aren't commercial products or services that exactly meet these needs, can we modify, can we easily adapt that commercial product to meet the specific requirements of the government for this acquisition? Then, if the market research indicates there's no commercial or non-developmental solution, the agency needs to look into internally reevaluating its own needs, determine whether those needs can be adapted or restated to allow for the use of a commercial product or service already available in the market. Do we need to look at our requirements? Do we need to look at what's needed? Does this absolutely require this creation of something that is new, or can we adjust these requirements to fit within a product or service already available that we've identified through this market research, which will increase the efficiency and decrease the cost of providing that product or service to the government. On the other hand, the agency can utilize the commercial solution already available. Contracting officer can now use FAR Part 12 to solicit and contract for that commercial product or service, which FAR Part 12 will be discussed in greater detail in a future webinar. Using these FAR Part 12 terms does make it easier for the government to buy the item using commercial practices, though. Finally, it's important to document the market research in an appropriate manner. based on the size and complexity of the acquisition. The market research report generated may be used in several ways. For instance, if there's a similar need or identical need in the near future, the market research report generated from a past procurement can be useful for up to 12 or 18 months for use by another agency seeking a similar product. For instance, market research report may be used to determine whether a small business solution was considered, whether a set-aside was appropriate. If the solicitation is protested for one of those reasons, a market research report is invaluable for that purpose. In addition, as an aside, it is also important to note that the FAR does mandate that agencies should not request potential sources to submit more than the minimum information necessary. So another aspect of protecting contractor data and confidential information. Next slide, please. Now moving on to some of the techniques used for market research. None of these are reinventing the wheel. A lot of these are really self-explanatory, but it's helpful to go through some of the most common techniques used by agencies when conducting this market research. So, for example, agencies contact experts on the market capabilities that may be needed to meet the agency's requirements. This includes public and private sector experts in the government and in industry, to make sure that the agency is getting a full picture of what exists in the market. Market research should also include a review of the results of other market research recently undertaken. As we discussed on the last slide, part of the reason adequate documentation is so important for each market research undertaken is because that report generated may be requested or used by other agencies in future solicitations. When undertaking market research, the agency should also publish formal requirements for information in journals or business publications. This includes requests for information, or RFIs, as you may have heard them, as well as sources sought notices. For each solicitation, the agency should look at trade publications that are most relevant to the agency's need in order to get a complete and fulsome picture of the market. So for instance, if it's a construction contract, publishing these RFIs or sources sought notices in construction trade journals, or for information technology, publishing these notices in IT trade publications. Now, just a quick note between the difference between a RFI and a sources sought notice. A sources sought notice is a market research inquiry used to identify potential sources. It's most often used to identify a small business or a socioeconomic category small business out in the market that may be able to meet the agency's need. An RFI, request for information, on the other hand, is a much more technical inquiry. That is a request for industry participants to provide answers to particular questions and comment on or provide potential solutions to a technical question. However, very important, in practice, RFIs and sources sought notices are used almost interchangeably by agencies. So it's very important when reviewing an RFI or a sources sought notice and considering whether a contractor is going to respond to read the actual requirements very carefully. Make sure that you're adequately and accurately responding to the request from the government. All right, another market research technique that agencies use is to search both government and commercial databases of contracts intended to be used by multiple agencies for information relevant to the acquisition. This includes the GSA schedule program, the government statewide acquisition contracts, or GWACs. Agency can also look at the SBA directory if it's looking for a small business to utilize for a certain requirement. Next slide, please. A couple more techniques. Some more techniques include participating in interactive communication with industry and acquisition personnel. The contracting officer should be discussing the agency's needs not only internally within the program, but also internally within the larger agency, as well as with contractors and industry participants. Agencies will also obtain source lists for similar items from other recent contracting activities, review catalogs, and other publicly available product literature published by the industry. This includes, searching online, as well as materials made available to the agency from these industry participants. Finally, agencies can conduct pre-solicitation meetings or conferences to invite potential offerers to provide feedback and information very early on in the acquisition process. These, include industry days or invitationals for contractors to come to the site of the agency and give presentations, ask questions, respond to questions from the government really early on in the process to make sure that offerers are able to provide adequate solutions to the government, and the government is seeking solutions that adequately meet its needs. All of that is part of this market research process. Importantly, as a last note on techniques, all of these techniques provide a path for the agency to ensure that it is meeting its market research obligations under FAR Part 10, but also understanding the marketplace before issuing a solicitation and learning about all of the potential offerers, including non-traditional contractors and small businesses, in a way that allows the agency to get the best value in its acquisitions. And next slide, please. Okay, so the results of market research. Once market research has been completed, the agency should be able to determine if existing sources can satisfy its existing requirements. If commercial products or services are not available, are there non-developmental items that can be adapted to meet the agency's needs? If commercial products cannot be used for the needs of the agency as a whole, can the agency use a commercial product to be incorporated at a component level? Can a commercial service be incorporated at a component level? How far down in the subcontracting chain can we bring in commercial products or services if we can't use it at a higher level in the contract? Market research also allows an agency to make its IGE, or independent government estimate, for certain solicitations, or to ensure maximum use of recovered and sustainable materials. Finally, agencies should be able to identify small and socioeconomic category businesses that may be able to meet the agency's needs. Can this requirement be set aside for a hub zone company? If not, can it be set aside for another socioeconomic category business, women-owned or service-disabled veteran-owned small business? If not, what about a general small business set aside? If not, will it be a full and open, unrestricted competition? Maybe there are no providers for the requirement, as the government currently has it stated. Or is there only a single provider and the agency must use a sole source award for that requirement? All of this is determined at the market research stage. Next slide, please. Now, so far we have been talking about the government's duties to conduct market research. What must the agency do before and during a solicitation to meet its market research obligations? But what about the contractor? What about the companies? FAR 52210-1 requires that the contractor must conduct market research in certain situations. So when before awarding subcontracts over $250,000, other than for commercial products or services, a prime contractor must conduct market research. This FAR provision is included in all non-commercial product or commercial services solicitations over $6 million. And it requires, contractors of the large $6 million plus prime contracts to determine if there are any commercial products or services that exist at a subcontractor level that meet the agency's requirements. So the market research requirement is typically a government agency requirement, but if you are a large prime contractor, that requirement gets passed down to you to include in your subcontracts. So next slide, please. And that about covers market research. I want to thank you for attending this webinar today on FAR Part 10 market research. My contact information is on the screen, so please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or follow-ups. It has been such a pleasure speaking to you today.
Thanks so much, Alexandra. It was a great presentation. I would encourage any of the government contractors who are on the line to go back and reread or re-listen to responding to RFIs and sources sought that Alexandra touched on. That's a great time to get in with the government and get on their radar before that, we'll say, quote unquote, opportunity graduates to an RFP or RFQ. It obviously takes some time for it to matriculate, but in my opinion, it's a good time to get in front of the government. So excellent presentation, really important part of the FAR. They all are, but nice to have the content fresh here. As I mentioned last time we covered this, it was 2020, so good to have the current information. So thanks, Alexandra. Thanks to all of our sponsors. Thanks to everybody that took time out of their day. We'll have the recording up on YouTube within 24 hours. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, it doesn't cost you anything except 2 minutes of your time just to go over there and click on it. You'll be alerted when the new webinars are uploaded. If you are currently listening to this as a YouTube recording, leave a comment, like the video. We always encourage feedback and comments. And if you guys have questions about anything that was covered today, please contact Alexandra Prime. You've got our contact information here. And I think that will do it for today. So thanks, everybody. We hope to see you on Friday for FAR Part 11.